to talk about standard work and how TWI, or training within industry, can help drive the execution of standard work. But why is standard work important? Why do we need a prescribed way of doing things? And if we have one, why should people follow it? So let's explore why we think this is important. Using data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, we can plot the number of establishments added or lost in the last 2 decades. We noticed 2 specific periods of decline. In the years surrounding September 2001, and most recently in the Great Recession starting in 2008. From the years 2003 to 2008, the country added around 40,000 establishments per year. In the years 2008 and 2009, the country lost 130,000 establishments each year. There are things that a business can control. For example, hiring, strategy, the processes and methods, the attitudes, and so on. But there are certain things an organization cannot control. For example, economic pressures, the weather, competition, and their customers. So the question then, could an excellent organization could have resisted falling victim to the Great Recession? These charts represent 3 larger companies and their revenue for the periods of 2007 and 2011, which basically covers the years of 2008 and 2009. Notice the recovery time the revenue took to return to 2008 levels for Starbucks. From 2008 to 2010, it took about 2 years for them to basically get back to the revenue that they were at pre-recession. If we look at Microsoft, it took around 2 years as well. And if we look at Caterpillar, it took nearly 3 years for them to get to it. Well, let's continue to look at these larger companies. Now let's evaluate the revenue growth curve if the recession had not occurred. If we look at Caterpillar, for example, they've effectively lost 3 years of their growth. And if you look at their growth curve, they're still actually not back on the original growth curve pre-recession times. If we look at Microsoft and their slope, they've never actually really gotten back on their growth curve. They've diverged from their original growth curve. And if we look at Starbucks, Starbucks basically is on the same growth curve. In other words, if you look at the slopes, they're pretty much the same, except that there was a hiccup and it dropped them down in 2009, which is basically revenue that they're never going to get back unless their growth curve becomes increased. But let's look at a different kind of company. So Mesa is a manufacturer of products that prevent metal structures from corroding and was honored as a presidential role model for the Malcolm Baldrige Award in 2006. They also received the Small Business Baldrige Award in 2012. So the question is, did they avoid the recession? The answer is no, they didn't. However, if you look at 2009, they dropped down, but right away in 2010, they popped right back on top of their growth curve. If we look at 2001, it actually didn't affect them at all. They flattened out. They weren't on the same curve, but at least they didn't decline. And if you look at the slide carefully, you'll notice that around 2000-ish, they started their ISO journey. In 2002, they started their Baldrige journey. So they were already on their way to essentially driving their business from a systems perspective. So having an organizational system seems to mitigate the effects of outside influences. Baldrige is not a process. It's a framework which describes what to consider when looking at organizational excellence. Starbucks uses lean in driving down wait times at their stores. Caterpillar has been a Lean Six Sigma advocate since 2001, but recently, as recent as 2010, they seem to de-emphasize the program's importance. And Microsoft, and I can say this from personal experience, has pockets of Lean Six Sigma thinking, but is opportunistic in its application. So really none of those have embraced the systems approach to driving excellence. They've looked at them from terms of adopting tools, but not necessarily looking at it from a systems perspective. So having an organizational system and being systems focused helps companies respond more quickly to outside influences and makes them more immune. Again, I said Baldrige isn't a process, so it doesn't tell you how to do it, it just tells you what excellence can look like. So how would you go about building organizational excellence? So we think an organization can develop excellence really using a 5-step approach. Our 5 steps basically start with strategic alignment, which is an organization should plan its future and ensure that it has deployed that plan to everyone in the organization. This is where tools like Hoshin Conry and policy deployment come in. Step 2, you need to build your system. Once there's a plan, we should build a system of execution, that is the how we do things, including an end-to-end process architecture, including the business system documentation such as policy, processes, metrics, and work instructions, and then organizational design to execute the work. Step 3, now that there's a plan and a way to execute the plan, we should know how we're doing. Facts and data are used to drive daily operational decisions and identify areas of concern. Step 4 then is you have a plan, a system, and a scorecard. Lets you know how you're doing and doing against your strategy. So we need to develop a system of continuous improvement, and this is where Lean and Six Sigma and theory constraints and a number of those tools really come into practice and really shine. So step 5 basically is building the momentum. So the first 4 steps fundamentally fill out the plan, do, check, act cycle. But we need another step to harness the momentum of that cycle by investing in our assets and communicating within our community. That means great employee development programs and organizational communication. So now that we have a method, let's talk about the tools. These blocks represent many of the Lean Six Sigma tools and should be recognizable to most everyone on the webinar. We've arranged the blocks so that the tools that are fundamental or foundational are on the bottom, and the tools that are at the top are more strategic. You'll notice that the 5S, SIPOC, statistics, RACI, and the 5 Ys are foundational. You'll also notice that having a standard way of doing things, that is standard work, is also foundational. So let's explore standard work for a minute. The Toyota production system defines standard work as organizing all the tasks around human motion and creating an efficient production sequence without any waste or muda. It consists of 3 elements: takt time, working sequence, and standard in-process stop. Takt time, which is the amount of work time or amount of available work time in seconds or minutes divided by the required number of items, that is the demand, which is the pace at which your line should run. Work sequence then is the order in which each operation is performed, and standard in-process stop then is the number of minimum parts within the cell always on hand for processing on or between sub-processes. Some of the benefits of standard work provides a way for managing change, such as change in products, people, or processes. It provides more predictable outcomes for consistent quality and predictable throughput, and it helps employees feel that they've achieved an outcome, that is, they've checked it off. It also has some challenges. It's not too difficult to design and document standard work. It's much more difficult to assure that what's been documented is being followed. So TWI really is about reinforcing the use of standard work. So let's talk about TWI. The Training Within Industry service was created by the United States Department of War running from 1940 to 1945 within the War Manpower Commission. Its purpose was to provide consulting services to industry that were critical to the ramp-up of the war machine for World War II to ensure there were enough trained and skilled personnel necessary to meet the demands of the war. At the end of its 5-year service, the TWI program had instructed over 1.6 million workers in 16,500 plants. TWI is a complement, at least in our perspective, a complement to the Lean Six Sigma toolset, and it emphasizes the importance of standard work because you can't teach work and execute it predictably if it's not defined. TWI provides the tools and techniques for defining and assuring standard work is followed and effective. Some of its benefits: it provides a disciplined approach to training and coaching inexperienced staff. It reduces the opportunities for defects by reinforcing consistent standard work and making sure it's more repeatable. And it improves process stability by reducing special causes. Additionally, it reduces wear and tear on equipment, and even more so when coupled with a TPM or total preventative maintenance program. It improves the relationships with management and individual contributors because people like to know what they're supposed to do. And it clarifies expectations, which lead to fewer misses. It ensures the work is defined, and what is defined is easier to measure and improve. Some of the references that you can go look at after this talk include our website, so you'll find a couple of blog articles up there. But there's also a really good website called trainingwithinindustry.net, which has some of the original documentation that TWI had put together in the 1940s. TWI focuses on the supervisor role, so let's define what supervisor means. A supervisor is anyone who is responsible for leading and teaching others what they need to do for the organization. A supervisor has 5 needs. The first need is knowledge of the work, which refers to the information that specifically pertains to what is required in creating value for the specific product or service. For example, the tools, processes, technical skills, and equipment. They also need a knowledge of responsibilities, and this refers to the areas for which the supervisor is accountable for delivering results. This would include the company rules or policies, the agreements, the regulatory requirements, and any important relationships. They also need to have skill in improving methods. This embodies the ability to create continuous process improvements for the area in which the supervisor leads. It includes driving better quality and efficiencies within the work cell, and working with upstream and downstream processes for a more efficient flow. They also need to have skill in leading. And this refers to the skills needed for working with people most effectively. The supervisor's behaviors are based on the foundations for good relations, that is, communicate performance feedback, give credit, communicate about changes, and look for each person's best abilities. We'll cover that a bit later in the webinar when we talk about job relations. And finally, they need to have skill in instructing. And this refers to the skills necessary for supervisors to develop a trained workforce. A trained workforce helps to reduce scrap, rework, and rejects. It often helps to reduce accidents and results in less damage to tools and equipment. So most of us, so let's talk about skill in instructing for a second. Most of us are not natural-born teachers. If you reflect on your own experiences for a moment, you probably had maybe 1, 2, or possibly 3 teachers that you could look back on and say, yeah, they were great teachers. Most individuals must learn how to effectively instruct, and like any skill, it must be practiced to achieve mastery. The TWI job instruction sessions discuss and demonstrate the skill in instructing. We use ineffective and effective instruction examples to illustrate, either using folding a t-shirt or the underwriter knot example. It emphasizes that each participant takes a role as a teacher and a learner to practice the skill of instructing using their specific job tasks as examples. Why is training important? Well, the reason training is important is because things change. Designs change in terms of what it is you're delivering as a product or service. The equipment that you use changes. Your requirements for what you do every day may change. The standards by which you do them may change. People leave, they're promoted, or they leave the company, and so on. Additionally, stuff happens. Sometimes we hire the wrong people for the wrong job. Oftentimes we don't train them well. We do make mistakes, and sometimes, quite honestly, our heads are somewhere else. So let's talk about ineffective and effective instruction. So the telling method is when you tell someone what you want them to do. This is widely used, and if you reflect on your own experiences, you probably have had many jobs where you showed up and they said, do this, this, and this, and then kind of left you to your own devices. So let's talk about why that doesn't work. Well, there's this notion of thought speed versus listening speed. Most people speak at about 125 words per minute. We have the mental capacity to listen at 400 words per minute. The difference means we use only 25% of our ability, leaving 75% to distract us. We're also inefficient listeners. After we listen to an oral presentation, on average, we retain about 50% of what we're told. 48 hours later, we lose an additional 50%, meaning we only remember about 25% of what we're told. Remembering only 25% of a job can be very detrimental to the organization. Believe it or not, listening skills suffer with age. In a study by Ralph G. Nichols at the University of Minnesota, he observed that the listening abilities of children in grades K through 12 steadily dropped from 90% in first grade to 44% in middle school to 28% in high school. Teachers would randomly interrupt the class and ask, what was I talking about? Listening skills can increase with deliberate practice and probably does to some degree in adults. And all you have to do is reflect on your college experience for a moment to know that that's true. Additionally, listening is hard. Consider for a moment any listening activities that you've embarked upon, such as attending a class or facilitating a talk and so on. You're probably quite tired at the end of it. Let's talk about the top 10 bad listening habits to give us a sense of this. Number 10, one of the things that we do is we call subject matter uninteresting. If we declare something to be dull, it most likely will be. We visualize boring and hence become bored. Number 9, we criticize the speaker's delivery or appearance. We notice the speaker is not speaking clearly, is disorganized, perhaps dressed badly, and our negative opinions impact our ability to hear. Number 8, we become too stimulated. We may disagree with the speaker about a certain topic and spend time formulating counterarguments instead of listening to the remaining topics. Number 7, and this is the one that I'm really guilty of, is listening only for facts. Attempting to separate opinion from fact, we may spend time only looking for the truth of it versus listening to the topic holistically. Number 6, we try to organize what is being said. Some people organize thoughts differently than we do, so we may spend time to organize the speaker's topics into our own framework, which then takes away from what it is we're trying to hear. Number 5, fake attention. Beware of people looking at you with their chins on their hands while you're teaching, because more than likely they're off in their own heads. Oops, sorry. My bad. Hit the wrong key. There we go. Number 4. Create or tolerate distractions. A huge distraction is you or someone around you talking about a particular point of the talk, or worse, about what they're going to do after the talk. Number 3, we evade the difficult. The shortest path between 2 points can often be a straight line. However, sometimes we need to take the path less traveled to truly understand something. A difficult topic may take longer to process, but often provides the key points that we need in terms of truly understanding what we're hearing. Number 2, we submit to emotional words. Exaggeration can set people off, and we spend more time getting wound up about how the topic was delivered versus what we actually heard. And the number 1 reason that we have bad listening habits is waste thought power. As we saw in the previous observation about the difference between thought speed and listening speed, we often need to exert effort to help our learner maintain focus on what we're teaching. We'll see when we discuss effective instructing how each of these top 10 might be dealt with or mitigated. In the TWI job instruction class, we use folding a t-shirt to illustrate ineffective and effective instruction. We present the telling and showing methods. Let's consider the instructor challenges of telling for a moment. Telling someone how to do a job may be an excellent means of instruction when properly used, but it has limitations. Scrap and defects often results when telling is misused. Most people don't understand just by listening to someone, for many of the reasons we previously discussed. But even if they're listening intently, many people still won't understand due to vocabulary misunderstandings, perhaps a previous relationship with the instructor, or what's on their mind that day. Many operations are difficult to explain in just words. Operations can seem complicated when simply listening to someone explain the process. What may seem easy to us is often not easy to the first-time learner. We forget things or don't properly emphasize important details. Many of us are not clear speakers and often don't use the words that someone else may better understand. Sometimes we use fill-in words such as or you know. We expect someone to understand, and when they nod their head, we assume that they do. The lean tool of standard work is one remedy for bridging the gap, but by itself is insufficient without an effective instructional method. And that's really where TWI job instructions really shines. It emphasizes if the worker hasn't learned, the instructor hasn't taught. Showing is another means of instructing. It can set the standard of performance, that is, show what a good outcome looks like, and it can emphasize the sequence, and demonstration reinforces the order in which tasks can be performed. It's better than telling, however, it has its limitations as well. For example, it depends on a skilled instructor. Showing the proper method requires a skilled person, otherwise we can inadvertently teach someone the wrong way to do something. It's small group focused. Students must be able to see what is being shown, and often this limits the number of folks who can view the demonstration. Even if it's done by a video, the camera angle can sometimes limit what is being seen. And it requires repetition for student retention. Often we need to see things over and over again for them to sink in. So let's look at the showing method in a little more detail. In the class, we actually show a video of how to fold a t-shirt. Some of the common mistakes we make by this is perspective. For example, we miss tricky details because we don't know what to look for or we don't see it. And even when seeing a job from a proper angle, many people won't understand it immediately, and it can take many repetitions until the process is clear. When we copy motions, we can see what to do, but we don't understand what it feels like to do it. There are many details and nuances that are difficult to understand simply by watching someone. In complex operations, for example, playing a piano, we can't simply observe and then repeat the performance flawlessly. Some motions are hard to copy without diligent practice. So TWI emphasizes if the worker hasn't learned, the instructor hasn't taught. So let's talk about the TWI way for job instruction. Job instruction presents a preparatory approach and a step-by-step process for instruction. On the preparation side, it looks at 4 main things. The first one is to have a timetable. And that is what needs to be understood by the learner and when. It helps to drive specific skills in context of specific jobs. It also sets up a job progression so workers can achieve higher levels of competency. The second thing is job breakdown. Using standard work or standard processes, job breakdowns emphasize easy to understand steps and key learning points for each job. A key point could be an emphasis on what good looks feel like, or the feel of an operation, or perhaps a safety issue. The third one is having everything ready, which is really kind of a nod to Kanban, making sure all the materials, equipment, and supplies are available to instruct good practices in job execution. And finally, with a nod to 5S, is having the workplace properly arranged, which is ensuring the work environment is laid out as it would be in the production environment. It also puts together a step-by-step process. So we have a way to approach it and then a step-by-step process on how to do it. The first step is preparing the worker. This is focused on making sure the worker is ready to learn. It includes understanding what he or she already knows and make sure that they have the potential competence to learn the new job. The second step is presenting the operation, which tells, shows, and illustrates one step at a time, while emphasizing the key points to learn. It's a discussion between the instructor and the learner, making sure the learner is picking up the key points. The third step is trying out performance. This is where the learner performs the job while explaining what he or she is doing and emphasizing the key points that they learned in step 2. The instructor is correcting errors as they occur, gently and patiently. And the fourth step is follow-up. A clear confidence path is established. For example, the worker knows who to go to for help, and there are periodic check-ins that are done less and less frequently until confidence has been achieved. With every TWI method, there is a 3x5 card with 2 sides to summarize the method. Side 1 emphasizes the pre-work or the approach to the method, and side 2 emphasizes the process or the steps to follow. That's one of the things that most impressed me about TWI, was really its elegance and its simplicity. It's easy to grasp, it's easy to learn, and it's easy to teach. So standard work, the sequential actions to complete a job without waste, should be connected to the company's strategies and the business process architecture. It should include safety considerations, environmental impacts, and procedural steps. TWI reinforces standard work through job breakdown worksheets, which trains each step in the standard procedure, and one-point lessons, or some of us know those as desktop instructions, which are visual in-cell reminders for the standard work. So now that we've seen how job instruction can help us, let's consider job relations. So let's recall the supervisor's 5 needs. The first 2 are knowledge of the work and knowledge of responsibilities, referring to the information that specifically pertains to what is required in creating value for the product or service, and the area for which the supervisor is accountable in delivering results. It also includes skill and improving methods, embodying the ability to create continuous process improvement for the area in which the supervisor leads. It includes skill in leading, which is what we're going to talk about in job relations, and skill in instructing, which is what we just talked about in terms of job instruction. So what are the unique supervisor challenges in leading people? Well, businesses exist to make money or create value for their stakeholders, which is done by delivering a product or service a customer is willing to pay for. People and machines create products and services. Machines are assets and require maintenance, which is pretty clear. For example, machines have manuals and normally maintenance plans. People are assets as well, but they're different. Last time I looked, no employee ever came with their own user manual. Everyone's different, and the maintenance can be a challenge. Supervisors affect the worker's job performance. 90% of the worker's experience is judged based on their supervisor's behavior. If you've ever participated in any employee satisfaction surveys, you've seen that. A good relationship between the supervisor and the team members is the most efficient way to get great results. So job relations is about teaching the skills necessary to build and maintain the best possible working relationships. So let's explore those skills. There are things we can do to build and maintain good relations. For example, we can let each person know how they're doing. As members of a team, we want to feel confident that we're doing good work. Otherwise, we begin to doubt ourselves, which can lead to unhappy feelings, leading to poor performance and potentially behavioral issues. We can also give credit when credit is due. Finding the everyday moments to give credit to someone who has done something that helped the organization, team, or another team member feeds the confidence of the team. This small investment builds team member trust in the supervisor and into each team member. Ultimately, this helps to avoid crisis management and the hero mentality. We can tell people in advance about changes that will affect them. Clarifying expectations in advance builds trust in the relationship. We should never assume intentions are clear unless they're presented and understood, which means the other person understands the same way that we understand. And we can make the best use of each person's ability. People like to do challenging things. If they get bored or stop learning, usually that starts a downward spiral leading to lethargy and apathy, which results in poor quality and declining productivity. We should find challenging assignments for our team members, maintain enthusiasm, and a connection to the job and to the team, ultimately driving innovation and higher levels of productivity. These foundations are important to everyone. If we pay attention to these foundations, we will head off most potential issues. However, what should we do if we do have an issue? When something does happen, or we find out, or we observe a potential issue, one of the things that we can do is we can get the facts, which is it's important to get the whole story, because to get it as unvarnished as possible, using our judgment and asking multiple sources to reduce the bias as much as we can. We can review the record, for example, using our standard work, our policies, or any other method used to gather process artifacts. We can also, the next step then is to weigh and decide. It's important that we don't jump to conclusions. I'm sure all of us has had the opportunity to reflect on what we've seen when we've seen someone such as ourselves make a decision before we had the benefit of thoughtful data gathering. The information we gathered earlier should make sense and fit logically together as best as it can. Next thing we do is we take action. We should take action if it is our action to take. It can be easy to pass the buck, so we should be sure we're taking action within our control to best achieve the desired outcome. And then we check results. Ultimately, we as supervisors are responsible for improving production, so our action should be centered on achieving the organizational goals in the best possible way. That does not mean production at all costs. Ultimately, any short-term gains must be paid for in some way. And then finally, we can learn. It's important to learn how our behaviors affect those around us. Our behaviors shape our teams. Our behaviors affect the performance of our team, and consequently, the performance of the organization. Every decision we make and outcome achieved, good or bad, is a learning opportunity. It informs our actions and behaviors so that we improve our foundations for good relations. Like job instruction, job relations presents a way of behaving and a way of acting. The foundations for good relations informs our behaviors that we proactively avoid issues by treating everyone with respect and tending to their needs, which ultimately helps the organization achieve its goals. When we do encounter a problem, the job relations method provides a systematic approach to handling the issue in an effective way by focusing on facts, logical decision-making, follow-up, and learning to make decisions better in the future. TWI focuses on the tactical implementation of standard work, emphasizing the way to do the job, which is job instruction, the way to manage others within the job, which is job relations, and the way to improve how to get the job done, which is job methods. Each module emphasizes the learning with limited instruction and comprehensive participation. Each participant is given an opportunity to try out performance in context of the group. Each person learns by being the presenter or teacher and a participant and reviewer. We've found that using these methods can drive better compliance to standard work practices and ultimately be a significant and necessary part of developing organizational excellence. Thank you.